The Sega Dreamcast is Sega's last console, and a console that was actually really powerful but sadly eaten alive by the PlayStation 2 1 year later. Sega would exit the console war, leaving behind a legacy spanning 2 decades. While the Sega Dreamcast wasn't successful during its lifespan, it has found a cult following of collectors who have scooped up a ton of hidden gems. The Dreamcast turns 20 years old in September, so let's take a look at how these game prices are trending. Welcome to another episode of Retronomics, the series that takes a look at the factors affecting prices in video games. This episode will cover the Sega Dreamcast. I'll cover a brief history of the system, go over some features and accessories, and also forecast the prices of 20 titles to let you know if you should start collecting the Dreamcast now or if prices will go down in the next year. Released on September 9th, 1999 in North America, the Sega Dreamcast kicked off the 6th generation of consoles, beating the PlayStation 2 to the market by a full year. The Dreamcast would have the capacity for 4 players, have portable memory cards with minigames, and have the capacity to connect natively to the internet via a 56K modem. The Dreamcast was ahead of its time, graphics were next gen, and most games had a very smooth frame rate. But even before the release of the Dreamcast, Sony would steal Sega's thunder and release details of the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 2 would then release in the United States a year later with DVD capabilities and backwards compatibility. By March of 2001, the Sega Dreamcast would be discontinued and Sega would end their 18-year presence in the console market. Only 248 games were released in North America during the Dreamcast year and a half on the market. Out of those games, 67% are available complete in box for under $20, 29% between $20 and $50, 8% between $50 and $100, and just 3.6% of Sega Dreamcast games are over $100 complete in box. Like my Game Boy Retronomics episode, I'm going to cover some popular games and some cheap games as well. Let's start out with Skies of Arcadia. The popular open-world JRPG is one of the best reviewed Sega Dreamcast games, and so the price is pretty high. Currently averaging $73, the game is expected to keep its price around the same for the next year. It might drop a little bit before Christmas, but it doesn't seem as likely as the previous years. This version is actually cheaper than the GameCube port, so if you're interested, you might pick this one up. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The anime has hit fever pitch in the United States, which means that this game is steadily rising in value, crossing the $100 mark for the first time in June of 2019. Since this is a fighter game on the Dreamcast, it's also bound to be a good game as well. I don't think that it will shoot up dramatically in the next year, but it will most likely be above $100 for the next year or so. Power Stone 1 and 2 are 2 Capcom titles on the Sega Dreamcast, and they're fighters as well. They're unique 3D fighters and have only been re-released on the PlayStation Portable. With no indications that this game will make it to modern platforms, these games will continue to fluctuate but not spike too much. Power Stone 1 has been fluctuating between $40 and $60, heading to $60 as we head into September. Power Stone 2, on the other hand, is more expensive. Coming out towards the end of Sega Dreamcast's life, it's more sought after, fetching between $80 and $100 with the highest recording price of $106 in June of 2019. This game has dropped back down, but will likely keep rising as long as these games don't see a sequel or a remaster. While price charting has the price at $83, the sold listings paint a different picture, with some going for $115 with a couple of open bids ending at $35, so keep an eye out, you might catch a deal. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, another game quickly approaching $100, and a handful of sales have been in the high 90s, with one on the 15th of August going for $115. So if you see it and this is on your games to buy list, I suggest picking it up before every complete copy starts going for over $100. GigaWing 1 and 2, you're going to notice that there are going to be a lot of Capcom titles on this list, and GigaWing 1 and 2 are bullet hell shooters, which means that they're also prone to high prices. While GigaWing 1 was met with a critic score of 50, it's still fetching a premium price, getting really close to $100 permanently. It can still be found for less, but if you're into shoot 'em ups, probably be a good idea to try this game out and buy it more sooner than later. GigaWing 2 is even more expensive with no relief in sight. Another critically panned game, but since it came out in the last year of Dreamcast's life cycle, this game is pretty sought after for completionists, with copies going over $300 in some sales. Phantasy Star Online's official servers have been discontinued since 2003, but you can still find private servers. If you work for it just a bit, this game is pretty inexpensive and playing online is still kind of fun. Since the official servers are down, expect this game to remain between $15 and $16 for the next few years. Soul Calibur is a great fighting game that's actually the second biggest selling game on the Sega Dreamcast. As such, copies are pretty plentiful and not really hard to find. The game is between $18 and $20 and has been for ages, so I don't expect it to be climbing anytime soon. Seaman is a pretty unique game for the Dreamcast. I spoke about this on my Angry Video Game Nerd video, and the price will continue to climb when people make this game complete with the required microphone. Finding the game by itself isn't difficult, but the microphone adds an extra $30 to the price. Sonic Adventure 2 has been between $40 and $45 for years, and since there's a version available on modern platforms, the price of Sonic Adventure 2 will remain stable for the next year. Shenmue saw a huge spike in 2015 when it was announced that Shenmue 3 would be made for modern platforms, but that's the highest this game has been since it was new. Expect to pay about $25 for this game, or you can pick up the Shenmue 1 and 2 remaster for less than $20. Dino Crisis is a game to keep an eye on. This game has seen an increase of $20 since the beginning of the year, with no sign that it might level out. Might be a good idea to get this now rather than later. I'm not sure how high the price will go, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this at $65 by this time next year. Space Channel 5 is a dance rhythm game that's been under $10 for ages, but starting to climb in price to a whopping $13. Games that have a price point lower than $20 are harder to forecast because the fluctuations are a lot more frequent, but they're only a couple of dollars. I think that we'll see Space Channel 5 be a title that remains pretty affordable for the next year. KO the Kangaroo recently had a price peak in June, and that's because of the announcement of its sequel at the end of May. This game's price is trending back down, and I expect this game to drop back down to its pre-peak level by next year and will probably stay there. It's an unknown game, but a 3D platformer for the Sega Dreamcast, which is not very common for the console. Jet Grind Radio is another popular Sega Dreamcast title that has its price fluctuations throughout the year. Expect this game to level out at around $25 for the next year or so. Echo the Dolphin. Did you know that there was a 3D Echo the Dolphin game for the Sega Dreamcast? I didn't really find out about this game until this year when I started doing research for this video. Luckily, it's not expensive at around $16 complete, and I don't think that this game will go up in value very much, but you might see a bump when a new Echo the Dolphin game is officially released for the Intellivision Amico next year. Choo Choo Rocket, a cheap, good game that you should really pick up. Currently we're seeing a price spike, but probably that's because of the upcoming Dreamcast anniversary. But the game isn't that expensive overall and will remain that way for the foreseeable future. Definitely a great game for the Sega Dreamcast for the price. Project Justice, another Capcom title for the Sega Dreamcast, and currently at $120 and remaining stable. I don't think that we'll see this game climb any higher than $150 for the next year. Mars Matrix, I swear I didn't select only Capcom titles. It's just that a lot of the most expensive games for the Sega Dreamcast happen to be published by Capcom at this time. That being said, Mars Matrix is a shoot 'em up that's hovering around $120. This is another game that will hover between $100 and $130 for the next year or so. Cannon Spike is, surprise, another Capcom title. This game is a 2/3 shooter that's probably expensive because of the unique gameplay and also the appearance of Mega Man. Cannon Spike has passed $200 this year, and it probably won't be the last time. The forecast for next year is that this game doesn't seem to get too much higher than $200, but it won't drop significantly in the next year or so. D2, not to be confused with Disney's movie of the same name, is the sequel to the intriguing survival horror game D, yet it's unrelated to its predecessor's story. This game hovers between $60 and $70 and is currently trending back down. It's $4 less this time than it was last year, and I think that this game's prices will hold steady unless Sega pulls a fast one and releases a third D game, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. The Sega Dreamcast originally came in white, but would later have a sports model that would be all black. The system has 4 controller ports built in for multiplayer and a built-in 56K modem for online capabilities. The controller is similar to the Sega Saturn 3D controller, but a little bit smaller with 4 face buttons in the typical controller layout that you see today. There are 2 expansion ports available on the back of the controller, and both could support memory cards, but you could have a microphone or a rumble pack in addition to a memory card. In addition to some real unique games of which a lot have never seen sequels, the Dreamcast had some interesting accessories as well, the keyboard being the most interesting. The Dreamcast could connect to the internet for online play and also browse the internet. Of course, you can't really browse the internet without a mouse, so the Dreamcast has you covered. The Sega Dreamcast also had an interesting memory card called the VMU. In addition to keeping your game saves, some games like Sonic Adventure had mini games where you can take the game along with you like a tiny Tamagotchi. You could also connect 2 VMU together for transferring of data and 2-player minigames. If you didn't want the VMU, a more traditional memory card was available. The traditional memory cards are more desirable since they don't require batteries. The Sega Dreamcast is a disc-based system console and as such is prone to more breakdown than a cartridge-based system. Most notably, the disc laser has some issues. It's not really common, but if you do come across a used Dreamcast that has had a less than pleasant past, there might be some more issues. But if it's well maintained like mine from day one, it's bound to last for a while. If you do come across a Dreamcast with a Bork CD drive, you can attempt to mod it with the GDEMU mod, which is similar to the RIA mod for the Sega Saturn. For $144, the chip will allow you to emulate the GD drive and play backups. Unfortunately, these parts are hard to come by and pre-orders open at intermittent times. There's another solution called the USB GD-ROM, which is from Russia and has mixed results for about the same price, but those are currently in stock as the recording of this video. As far as other solutions to play Dreamcast games, well, there's not much. Like the Sega Saturn, a lot of games remain exclusive to the system. Sure, popular games like Sonic Adventure were ported to other consoles like the GameCube, but games like KO the Kangaroo remain only playable on the Sega Dreamcast. And that wraps it up for this episode of Retronomics. Let me know in the comments below if you plan on collecting for the Sega Dreamcast, or are you planning on waiting for an easier SD solution? If you like this video, give it a like. It really helps these videos get recommended to others. And if you are new here, I have plenty of other Retronomic episodes for you to enjoy, like how the angry video game nerd affects retro video game prices and how Game Boy prices trend over time. In addition to Retronomics, I have the viewer voted review where you, the viewer, get to pick what video game I review next. Last time we reviewed Metal Wolf Chaos for the original Xbox, and Grabbed by the Ghoulies is next. So if that's something you're interested in, consider subscribing for future content. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Super Nicktendo, and I'll see you next time.